Steve Harvey removes microphone after foster child story. Adoption happened right there. The formation of families through foster care and adoption represents one of society's most profound expressions of commitment to vulnerable children. Yet the foster care system continues to face significant challenges in ensuring permanent, stable placements for children who cannot remain with their biological families. The events that unfolded on a Family Feud stage in January 2025 demonstrated to millions of viewers that family is defined not by biology alone, but by choice, commitment, and love, that the transition from foster placement to permanent adoption carries emotional weight that transcends legal proceedings, and that public affirmation of family bonds created through adoption serves important purposes for both the families involved and the broader community witnessing these commitments. When the Morrison family from Phoenix, Arizona walked onto the Family Feud stage, they appeared to be a typical multi-generational family unit, competing for prize money and enjoying shared experience. What the audience and production team did not initially know was that 16-year-old Marcus Morrison, standing among his parents and siblings as an equal member of the family team, was technically still in foster care placement, with the Morrisons pending finalization of adoption proceedings that had been delayed by complex legal processes and bureaucratic complications. The revelation of Marcus's status and his foster family's unwavering commitment to him would emerge during the game's progression, creating a moment so profound that Steve Harvey would make the unprecedented decision to remove his microphone and step away from his role as television host, to participate as a private citizen in a moment of family formation that would be formalized on that stage through spontaneous but legally binding declarations, witnessed by cameras, audience, and millions of future viewers. This narrative extends beyond the boundaries of heartwarming human interest story or exceptional television moment. It represents an exploration of the foster care system's complexities and challenges, the emotional journey that foster families and foster children navigate together, the legal and social processes through which foster placements become permanent adoptions, and the significant role that public affirmation and community witness play in validating family bonds created through choice rather than biology. Marcus Morrison's path to the Family Feud stage began with circumstances that thousands of children experience annually within the American foster care system. Born to parents who struggled with substance abuse disorders and untreated mental health conditions, Marcus entered foster care at age 7, when Child Protective Services determined that his home environment posed risks to his safety and well-being. The removal from his biological parents, while necessary for his protection, represented the first of many traumatic disruptions that would characterize his childhood. The statistics surrounding foster care outcomes paint a sobering picture of the challenges faced by children like Marcus. According to child welfare research, children who enter foster care at school age face particular difficulties in achieving permanent placements, as many prospective adoptive families prefer to adopt younger children, children who experience multiple foster placements, as Marcus did during his first 2 years in the system, demonstrate higher rates of educational disruption, behavioral challenges, and difficulty forming secure attachments with caregivers. The trauma of initial removal from biological parents, compounded by subsequent moves between foster homes, creates what child development specialists term complex developmental trauma that affects emotional regulation, trust formation, and relationship building. Between ages 7 and 9, Marcus experienced 5 different foster placements. Some placements ended due to circumstances beyond anyone's control, such as foster families relocating for employment or experiencing their own family crises that made continuing foster care untenable. Other placements ended due to behavioral challenges that Marcus presented, behaviors that child welfare professionals recognized as trauma responses, but that overwhelmed foster parents who lacked adequate training or support to address his needs effectively. Each placement disruption reinforced Marcus's developing belief that he was fundamentally unlovable and that no family would choose to keep him permanently. David and Sarah Morrison had become licensed foster parents 6 years prior to meeting Marcus, motivated by their Christian faith commitments and their desire to provide stable, loving homes for children experiencing family crisis. Both had grown up in stable, supportive families and felt called to extend similar stability to children who lacked such foundations through no fault of their own. They completed required foster parent training, obtained licensure through the Arizona Child Welfare System, and opened their home to children needing temporary or long-term placements. The Morrisons approached foster care with realistic understanding of the challenges involved. They had provided care for 8 children across various age ranges and placement types before Marcus arrived in their home. Some children had returned to their biological families after parents completed required services and demonstrated ability to provide safe care. Other children had moved to adoptive placements with relatives or other families. The Morrisons had experienced the satisfaction of contributing to positive outcomes, while also accepting that their role was often temporary, and that attachment to children who would ultimately leave their care required emotional resilience and commitment to children's best interests above their own desires. The Morrison household, when Marcus arrived, consisted of David and Sarah, their 2 biological children who were adults living independently, and 2 other foster children, ages 4 and 10. The family operated on principles of inclusion and equality, treating foster children as full family members rather than as temporary guests or charity cases. Biological and foster children participated equally in household responsibilities, family activities, and decision-making appropriate to their ages. The Morrisons worked intentionally to avoid creating hierarchies between biological and foster children that might communicate differential value or belonging. Marcus arrived at the Morrison home at age 9, having recently experienced his 5th placement disruption. His case file documented significant behavioral challenges including aggression toward peers, defiance of adult authority, difficulty in school settings, and general resistance to forming connections with caregivers. Child welfare professionals and therapists working with Marcus recognized that his behaviors represented trauma responses and attachment difficulties rather than inherent defiance or malice, but this understanding did not make the behaviors less challenging for foster parents attempting to manage daily life while addressing his needs. The Morrisons approached Marcus's placement with commitment to providing stability regardless of behavioral challenges, and with understanding that trust and attachment would develop slowly given his history of disrupted relationships. They worked closely with Marcus's therapist, attended training on trauma-informed parenting, consulted regularly with his caseworker, and maintained consistent routines and clear expectations, while also demonstrating patience with setbacks and behavioral regression that inevitably occurred during his adjustment process. The first year of Marcus's placement with the Morrisons tested everyone's capacity and commitment. Marcus tested boundaries constantly, seemingly attempting to provoke rejection that would confirm his belief that no family would choose to keep him permanently. He violated household rules, acted aggressively toward the younger foster children in the home, struggled academically despite having adequate cognitive abilities, and maintained emotional distance from David and Sarah despite their consistent warmth and availability. The Morrisons persisted through these challenges with combination of firm boundaries, consistent consequences, genuine affection, and unwavering commitment to Marcus's presence in their family. They repeatedly communicated through both words and actions that behavioral challenges would not result in placement disruption, that he belonged in their family regardless of his choices, and that they viewed him as their son rather than as temporary placement. This consistent message, delivered across months of daily interactions, gradually began to shift Marcus's internal working, models of relationships, and his capacity to trust adult caregivers. The transformation in Marcus's adjustment and his relationship with the Morrisons occurred gradually across the 2nd and 3rd years of his placement. As he began to internalize that the Morrisons would not reject him regardless of his behaviors, his need to test boundaries and provoke rejection diminished. As he developed trust in their consistent availability and support, his capacity to regulate emotions and manage behavioral responses to stress improved. As he experienced success in school and peer relationships with their support and advocacy, his self-concept shifted from fundamentally damaged child to capable young person facing challenges but worthy of support and investment. By the time Marcus reached age 12, he had been with the Morrisons for 3 years, longer than he had lived continuously with any caregivers since his removal from his biological parents. He referred to David and Sarah as his parents without qualification or explanation. He had developed genuine sibling relationships with the Morrisons' biological children during their visits home, and with the other foster children who continued to come and go from the household. He participated fully in family activities, contributed to household functioning, and demonstrated academic and social progress that his teachers and caseworker recognized as remarkable given his early challenges. The question of adoption had been raised multiple times during these 3 years. The Morrisons had made clear their desire to adopt Marcus and provide permanent legal security for his place in their family. However, the path to adoption proved more complicated than anticipated due to several factors. Marcus's biological parents, despite having made minimal progress in addressing the issues that led to his removal, maintained parental rights and had not consented to adoption. Termination of parental rights proceedings moved slowly, through family court, with multiple continuances and delays. Even after parental rights were eventually terminated when Marcus was 13, relatives emerged, claiming interest in placement, requiring additional investigations and legal proceedings to determine whether relative placement would serve Marcus's best interests, given his established attachment to the Morrisons and his expressed wishes to remain with them. The 3 years between initial termination of parental rights, when Marcus was 13, and the scheduled finalization of adoption when he would be 16, represented a period of legal limbo that created ongoing anxiety for both Marcus and the Morrisons. While Marcus continued living with the family and all parties intended for adoption to occur, the legal uncertainty meant that circumstances could theoretically change. Relatives could challenge placement decisions. New information could emerge about biological family members seeking custody. Bureaucratic complications or legal technicalities could create delays or obstacles. For Marcus, this legal uncertainty reactivated earlier fears about relationship permanence and family stability. Despite years of secure attachment to the Morrisons and their consistent reassurance of commitment, he struggled with anxiety that something would prevent the adoption from being finalized, and he would be removed from the only family where he had ever truly belonged. This anxiety manifested in occasional behavioral regression and increased need for reassurance about the Morrisons' commitment and the adoption timeline. For the Morrisons, the delays in finalizing adoption were frustrating and concerning. While they had no doubt about their commitment to Marcus or his place in their family, they wanted the legal recognition and security that adoption would provide. They wanted Marcus to have the permanent legal status that would eliminate any possibility of future disruption. They wanted him to share their surname, officially, rather than maintaining his birth name in official contexts. Most importantly, they wanted to communicate through the adoption finalization that he was their son in every sense, legally and permanently, with no qualifications or contingencies. The scheduled adoption finalization hearing was set for late January 2025, shortly after Marcus's 16th birthday. The timing felt significant to the family, as it would legally establish Marcus's permanent family status as he entered the latter years of adolescence and began preparing for transition to adulthood. The Morrisons planned a celebration following the court hearing, inviting extended family and friends to witness and celebrate the formalization of what they viewed as a family bond that had existed in reality for years, but would finally receive legal recognition. The Morrison family's decision to apply for Family Feud occurred several months before the scheduled adoption finalization, during the period when the adoption appeared certain but had not yet been legally completed. Sarah Morrison, scrolling through social media during a lunch break from her nursing job, saw a Family Feud casting call seeking families from the Phoenix area. She showed it to David that evening, suggesting it might be a fun family experience and an opportunity to create positive memories during a time when they were all managing anxiety about adoption proceedings. The family discussed the possibility at dinner that evening. Marcus expressed enthusiasm about potentially meeting Steve Harvey and appearing on television. The Morrisons' biological children, Jennifer and Andrew, both now in their 30s with families of their own, agreed to participate if their work schedules permitted. The application process required submitting a video showcasing the family's personality and explaining what made them interesting candidates for the show. The Morrisons' application video featured all family members introducing themselves and sharing something about their family dynamics. Marcus appeared in the video as an equal family member, introducing himself as Marcus Morrison and describing his role in the family with the same casual familiarity as the biological children. The video did not mention his foster care history or the pending adoption, as the family considered these private matters and Marcus's identity as their son needed no qualification or explanation for purposes of a game show application. The Family Feud production team selected the Morrison family based on their engaging personalities, good humor, and obvious family cohesion. The producers had no knowledge of Marcus's foster care history or the pending adoption. From their perspective, the Morrisons appeared to be a typical multi-generational family with good chemistry and entertainment potential. As the taping date approached in mid-January 2025, the Morrison family managed competing emotions. They were excited about the Family Feud experience and the opportunity to spend time together doing something novel and fun. They were also managing significant anxiety about the adoption hearing scheduled for the following week. The proximity of these two events created interesting emotional dynamics within the family. Marcus expressed to his therapist during a session 3 days before the taping that he felt both excited about Family Feud and anxious that something might go wrong with the adoption before it could be finalized. His therapist worked with him to identify these feelings, normalize them given his history, and develop coping strategies for managing anxiety during the coming week. The therapist also consulted with Sarah Morrison to ensure the family was providing appropriate support and reassurance during this emotionally significant period. David and Sarah Morrison discussed privately whether they should inform the Family Feud producers about Marcus's foster care status and the pending adoption. They ultimately decided that this information was personal and not relevant to their participation in the game show. Marcus was their son in every sense that mattered. The legal formalities of adoption finalization did not change that reality or warrant special disclosure in an entertainment context. The family traveled to Los Angeles for the taping, treating the trip as a mini vacation and opportunity for family bonding. They visited tourist attractions, ate at restaurants Marcus had requested based on television shows he watched, and generally enjoyed time together away from the routines and stresses of daily life. The Family Feud taping was scheduled for the final day of their trip, allowing them to relax and enjoy Los Angeles before the actual filming. The Morrison family brought warm, genuine energy to the Family Feud stage. Their obvious affection for one another and comfortable family dynamics created the kind of authentic entertainment that made for compelling television. Steve Harvey engaged with each family member during introductions, asking about occupations, hobbies, and family roles in his characteristic style that combined humor with genuine interest in people's stories. When Steve reached Marcus during the introduction segment, he asked the standard questions about school, interests, and his role in the family. Marcus responded that he was a junior in high school, played basketball, and was the youngest of the Morrison children. The exchange was pleasant and unremarkable, with no indication of the complexity underlying Marcus's presence in the family or the significance of the timing relative to his life circumstances. The game proceeded normally through the first 3 rounds, with the Morrisons demonstrating good chemistry and solid performance. Marcus proved to be a strong contributor, providing correct answers and showing quick thinking that suggested both intelligence and confidence. His interactions with David and Sarah during the game reflected comfortable parent-child dynamics, with supportive touches, encouragement after incorrect answers, and celebration of successful responses that characterized families with secure attachment and positive relationship quality. The Morrison family accumulated sufficient points through the first 4 rounds to advance to the bonus round. The production team announced that this would be a special segment featuring a question worth double points, designed to create additional excitement and reward strong performance. The question that would trigger the chain of revelations and transformative events was posed to the entire family for collective response. Steve Harvey read the question, with his characteristic dramatic flair. Name something that makes a house become a home. The Morrison family members looked at each other, engaging in the rapid nonverbal communication that characterized their decision-making process. Sarah was selected to provide the family's answer. She approached the microphone and for a moment appeared to be formulating a standard response about furniture, decorations, or family meals that would likely appear on the survey board. Then Sarah Morrison made a decision that deviated from game show strategy in favor of authentic personal expression. She looked directly at Marcus, standing among his siblings, and provided an answer that came not from calculation about survey responses, but from profound truth about her family's experience. Sarah said, her voice filled with emotion. "The answer that makes a house a home is love and commitment. Specifically the commitment to children who need families." The answer was not phrased in the brief, generic terms that typically characterized Family Feud responses. It was a statement of family philosophy and lived experience. Steve Harvey's expression shifted from his usual performance mode to genuine curiosity about what had prompted such a specific and emotionally charged response. Steve Harvey, demonstrating the interpersonal sensitivity that had made him successful across multiple entertainment contexts, recognized that Sarah Morrison's answer carried personal significance beyond game show competition. Rather than simply checking whether the answer appeared on the survey board, he gently asked Sarah what had prompted that particular response. Sarah Morrison, having already departed from game show strategy in her answer, made a second decision to share her family's story publicly. She explained that the answer reflected her family's experience as foster parents and specifically their journey with Marcus, who was standing on the stage as their son but was technically still in foster care pending adoption finalization scheduled for the following week. The revelation created immediate shift in atmosphere. The studio audience, which had been responding with typical game show enthusiasm, fell into attentive silence as they processed what Sarah had shared. Steve Harvey's expression reflected genuine emotion as he looked at Marcus, understanding suddenly that this young man's presence in his family represented years of choices, challenges, and commitment that transcended biological connection. Marcus, standing among his siblings, displayed complex emotions that crossed his face in rapid succession. There was embarrassment at having his private story shared publicly, pride in his family's commitment to him, anxiety about how this disclosure might be received, and visible emotion at hearing Sarah publicly claim him as her son in terms that made clear his value and belonging in the family. Steve Harvey, who frequently spoke about his own difficult childhood and his gratitude for the adults who had invested in him despite challenging circumstances, responded to Sarah's revelation with visible emotion. He approached Marcus directly, asking him how long he had been with the Morrison family and how he felt about the upcoming adoption. Marcus, struggling to maintain composure, explained that he had been with the Morrisons for 7 years, since he was 9 years old, and that the adoption finalization would make legal what had been true emotionally for years. He expressed that David and Sarah were his parents in every way that mattered, that their biological children were his siblings without qualification, and that the adoption hearing the following week represented the final step in becoming officially and permanently part of the family he had chosen and that had chosen him. The conversation between Steve and Marcus revealed details about Marcus's early foster care experiences, the challenges of his first year with the Morrisons, and the transformation in his life that stable, committed parenting had facilitated. Marcus articulated, with remarkable insight for a 16-year-old, that he understood many children in foster care never found permanent families, and that he felt both fortunate and grateful that the Morrisons had committed to him even when his behaviors made that commitment difficult. Steve Harvey, listening to Marcus speak, asked David Morrison about the decision to pursue adoption and the commitment required to support a child with complex trauma history and behavioral challenges. David's response emphasized that Marcus was their son, that the behavioral challenges Marcus had mentioned were understandable given his experiences, and that supporting him through those challenges had been an honor rather than a burden. He explained that family was created through choice and commitment rather than biology alone, and that Marcus had earned his place in their family through his own courage and resilience, just as they had hopefully earned their place in his life through consistent love and support. As the conversation continued, with various Morrison family members contributing perspectives on their family formation and Marcus's place within it, the emotional intensity in the studio increased. Sarah Morrison, speaking directly to Marcus rather than to Steve or the audience, expressed that the adoption hearing the following week felt almost redundant because Marcus had been her son in every way that mattered for years, but that she wanted the legal recognition to match the emotional reality and to ensure that nothing could ever threaten his place in their family. Marcus, no longer attempting to maintain composure, began crying as he listened to his mother's public affirmation of his belonging and value. Jennifer and Andrew, the adult biological children of the Morrisons, moved to stand on either side of Marcus in gesture of sibling solidarity and support. David Morrison joined Sarah, and the family stood together in physical configuration that communicated unity and mutual support. Steve Harvey, watching this family moment unfold, made a decision that would transform the taping from game show entertainment into something approaching sacred witness. He stepped away from the podium, removed his microphone in gesture that indicated he was stepping out of his role as television host, and asked the production team to stop recording. Steve Harvey's decision to halt production and remove his microphone represented recognition that what was unfolding transcended entertainment programming and required different framing and approach. With cameras stopped, Steve spoke to the Morrison family about what he had just witnessed and learned. He expressed that Marcus's story and the family's commitment to him represented something profound that warranted more than game show treatment. Steve shared his own experiences with foster care system through family members who had been involved in it, his understanding of the challenges faced by children in care and by families who opened their homes to vulnerable children, and his deep respect for the Morrisons' commitment to Marcus through years of challenges toward permanent family formation. He also spoke directly to Marcus about the courage required to trust adult caregivers after experiencing early relationship disruptions and trauma. During this private conversation, Steve learned additional details about the adoption timeline and the court hearing scheduled for the following week. He learned that the adoption had been delayed by complex legal proceedings that had created years of anxiety and uncertainty for both Marcus and the Morrisons, despite their mutual commitment and intention. He learned that all parties were managing significant emotion about the upcoming hearing and the relief that legal finalization would bring. Steve made a proposal that would transform the Family Feud taping into something unprecedented in the show's history. He suggested that rather than waiting for a court hearing the following week, the family could formalize Marcus's adoption immediately. On the Family Feud stage, with Steve facilitating the process and the audience and camera crew serving as witnesses to the family's public commitment, the proposal required immediate consultation with several parties to determine feasibility and appropriateness. The Family Feud production team consulted with their legal advisors about whether adoption proceedings could be conducted during a television taping and what legal requirements would need to be satisfied. The Morrisons consulted with each other about whether this public formalization aligned with their values and Marcus's comfort level. Most importantly, Marcus himself needed to provide informed consent to this significant deviation from planned private court proceedings. The legal consultation revealed that while adoption typically occurred through family court proceedings, the essential elements required for adoption finalization were consent of all parties, declaration of intent to create permanent parent-child relationship, and witness to these commitments. A judge would still need to sign final adoption decree, but that could occur administratively based on documented declarations made publicly during the Family Feud taping. The unusual venue did not invalidate the legal substance of the commitments if all parties freely consented and appropriate documentation was created. The Morrison family discussion addressed multiple considerations. They had envisioned adoption finalization as private family court proceeding followed by celebration with extended family and friends. The proposal to finalize adoption publicly on television represented significant departure from those plans. However, they also recognized potential value in public affirmation of adoption and in using their platform to highlight foster care adoption and the creation of families through choice and commitment rather than biology. Marcus's input was prioritized throughout these discussions. At 16, he was old enough to have meaningful voice in decisions affecting him, and sophisticated enough to understand implications of public versus private adoption formalization. He expressed that while he had initially imagined adoption as private court proceeding, the opportunity to have adoption finalized, surrounded by family on national television, felt meaningful and potentially valuable for other foster children, who might see that children in care could find permanent families and that chosen families were as valid as biological ones. After approximately 45 minutes of consultation and discussion, all parties agreed to proceed with adoption formalization during the Family Feud taping. The production team worked to create appropriate framework for the proceedings that would balance the solemnity and significance of adoption with the entertainment context of the show. They consulted with family law experts by phone to ensure that declarations and documentation would meet legal requirements for subsequent administrative finalization by family court. Steve Harvey worked with the Morrisons and Marcus to structure the adoption proceedings in ways that would honor the significance of the moment, while ensuring that all parties had opportunity to express their commitments and emotions authentically. He would facilitate the proceedings, not as game show host, but as witness and support for the family's public declarations. The studio audience was briefed about what would occur, and was asked to maintain respectful silence during the actual adoption declarations, with opportunity for celebration and response afterward. The production team made arrangements to document the proceedings for legal purposes, while also capturing footage that could be included in the Family Feud episode if the family consented to broadcast after the fact. When cameras resumed recording, the atmosphere in the studio had transformed completely from game show competition to something approaching ceremonial proceeding. The Morrison family stood together at center stage, Steve Harvey, still without his usual host microphone, and standing among the family rather than at his typical podium position, explained to the audience and cameras what was about to occur. Steve described Marcus's journey through foster care, the Morrison family's commitment to him across 7 years, and the decision to formalize his adoption publicly during the Family Feud taping, rather than waiting for scheduled court hearing the following week. He emphasized that what the audience was about to witness was not entertainment, but rather a family choosing to make public declaration of commitments that had existed privately for years. David Morrison was invited to speak first. He addressed Marcus directly, stating that Marcus had been his son in his heart for years and that the adoption formalization was simply legal recognition of existing reality. He spoke about watching Marcus grow from traumatized 9-year-old into confident 16-year-old young man, about the privilege of supporting that transformation, and about his pride in Marcus's resilience and courage. He stated clearly and unequivocally his commitment to Marcus as his son, his intention to provide support and love permanently, and his joy at being Marcus's father. Sarah Morrison spoke next, expressing similar commitments while also addressing more specifically the emotional journey of supporting child with complex trauma history through behavioral challenges toward secure attachment. She acknowledged that their family formation had required patience, flexibility, and commitment during difficult periods, but emphasized that Marcus had always been worth that investment and that watching him heal and thrive had been among the greatest satisfactions of her life. She stated her commitment to Marcus as her son without qualification or contingency. Jennifer and Andrew, the biological adult children of the Morrisons, spoke about their experience of gaining Marcus as a brother, about the ways he had enriched their family, and about their commitment to him as permanent family member. Their statements emphasized that family bonds created through choice and commitment, rather than biology, were no less valid or meaningful than biological relationships. Marcus was given opportunity to speak, though Steve made clear that he had no obligation to do so if he preferred to simply receive his family's commitments without public response. Marcus chose to speak, addressing his family members individually and collectively about what their commitment meant to him, and his own commitments to them as his permanent family. Marcus spoke about his experiences in multiple foster placements before arriving with the Morrisons, about his difficulty trusting that any family would keep him permanently, and about how the Morrisons had proven through consistent action across years that he belonged with them regardless of his behaviors or challenges. He expressed gratitude, not just for material provision, but for emotional investment, for choosing him repeatedly through difficult periods, and for treating him as equal family member rather than as temporary placement or charity case. He articulated understanding that adoption would not erase his history or the trauma he had experienced, but that it would provide legal recognition of his place in the Morrison family and eliminate the uncertainty that had characterized his childhood. He stated his own commitments to his parents and siblings, his intention to maintain these relationships throughout his life, and his hope to honor their investment in him by building a life characterized by the values they had modeled. The declarations were punctuated by tears from all family members, by embraces and physical affirmations of connection, and by visible emotion from Steve Harvey and many audience members who were witnessing these profound expressions of commitment and love. Following the declarations, Steve facilitated the formal elements required for legal documentation of adoption. He witnessed the Morrison families and Marcus's statements, confirmed that all parties were entering into adoption freely and with full understanding, and documented the date, time, and circumstances of the declarations. Legal advisors participating by phone confirmed that documented declarations combined with existing case file documentation would be sufficient for family court judge to sign final adoption decree administratively within days. Steve then announced to the Morrison family and to the audience that to the extent possible, without judicial signature on formal decree, Marcus Morrison was adopted, was legally and permanently part of the Morrison family, and would never again face uncertainty about his family status or belonging. The announcement was met with sustained standing ovation from the studio audience, visible emotion from production crew, and tears and embraces from the family. After the adoption proceedings concluded, Steve addressed the practical matter that the Morrison family had been in the middle of Family Feud game when the revelations and subsequent proceedings had begun. He announced that, given what had just occurred, game results felt almost irrelevant, but that fairness required completing the round that had been interrupted. Sarah Morrison's answer about commitment to children who need families was checked against the survey board. The answer did not appear in the exact phrasing she had provided, though love and family both appeared as separate responses. Under normal circumstances, the answer would not have received points. Steve declared that he was exercising host discretion to award the Morrison family full points for the answer, given the profound truth it represented and the circumstances under which it was provided. The Morrison family was declared the winner of their round, advancing to Fast Money bonus round. Steve announced that regardless of Fast Money performance, the show would be providing the Morrison family with maximum prize money of $20,000 to support Marcus's transition to adulthood and his future educational expenses. He also announced that his personal foundation would be matching that amount and directing funds toward supporting foster youth aging out of care in Arizona. When the Morrison family episode aired 6 weeks after the taping, it became not just the highest-rated Family Feud episode in the show's history, but also a significant cultural moment that generated extensive discussion about foster care, adoption, and family formation. The episode's broadcast was preceded by statements from the Morrison family, consenting to the footage being shared and expressing hope that their story would encourage other families to consider foster care and adoption and would provide encouragement to foster youth that permanent families were possible. The response from viewers was overwhelming and multifaceted. Foster and adoptive families shared their own stories of family formation through child welfare system, expressing that seeing the Morrison family's experience validated their own journeys. Current and former foster youth shared emotional responses to seeing adoption portrayed as profound commitment and celebration rather than as simple transaction or as rescue narrative that diminished youth's agency and dignity. Child welfare professionals used the episode as training and recruitment tool, discussing both the realities of foster care and the potential for positive outcomes when families commit to supporting children with complex needs. The segment where Steve Harvey removed his microphone and facilitated adoption proceedings became the most shared television moment of the year, viewed hundreds of millions of times across social media platforms, and discussed in contexts ranging from entertainment news to child welfare policy discussions, to faith communities' conversations about practical expression of gay commitment to vulnerable populations. The Morrison family's story created measurable impact on foster care system awareness and recruitment efforts. Child welfare agencies in multiple states reported significant increases in inquiries from prospective foster and adoptive parents in the weeks following the episode's airing. Many inquiries specifically referenced the Morrison family episode as inspiration or catalyst for exploring foster care, with prospective parents expressing that the episode had helped them understand foster care as viable family formation path and had challenged misconceptions about foster care adoption being appropriate only for very young children. Foster care agencies capitalized on this increased interest by developing recruitment materials and campaigns that built on themes from the Morrison family's story. They emphasized that children of all ages in foster care needed permanent families, that children with trauma histories could heal and thrive with appropriate support and commitment, and that families formed through foster care adoption were authentic families deserving of celebration and recognition. Several agencies reported that recruitment efforts explicitly referencing the Morrison family episode resulted in higher quality inquiries from prospective parents who had more realistic understanding of foster care and stronger commitment to supporting children with complex needs. Research organizations studying foster care outcomes began tracking what they termed the Morrison effect, examining whether the increased visibility and positive portrayal of foster care adoption correlated with improved outcomes through larger pool of potential adoptive families for children in care, and through reduced stigma surrounding minuting foster care adoption that had historically deterred some prospective parents from pursuing this path to family formation. In the months and years following the Family Feud taping and the adoption formalization, Marcus Morrison continued the developmental trajectory that had been established during his years with the Morrison family prior to adoption. The legal finalization of adoption, combined with the public affirmation of his place in the family, appeared to reduce anxiety that had persisted during the years of legal uncertainty. His academic performance remained strong, his social relationships continued to develop positively, and his preparation for transition to adulthood proceeded with support and guidance from his parents and siblings. Marcus spoke publicly about his experiences on several occasions when invited by foster care organizations or when participating in media interviews with his family. His articulate description of his journey through foster care, his perspective on what had enabled him to heal and develop secure attachment to the Morrisons, and his hope that other foster youth would find permanent families made him effective advocate for foster care reform and adoption awareness. He emphasized in these public statements that his positive outcome was not inevitable but rather resulted from combination of factors, including the Morrisons' commitment and skill, access to therapeutic support, educational advocacy, and stability maintained across years despite behavioral challenges. He acknowledged that many foster youth did not have access to these supportive conditions and that system reform was necessary to improve outcomes for all children in care, rather than celebrating individual positive stories while ignoring structural challenges. Marcus's perspective on his own story demonstrated sophisticated understanding of both personal factors and systemic issues affecting foster care outcomes. He credited his family's commitment while also recognizing that commitment alone was insufficient without adequate support services, appropriate therapeutic interventions, and policy frameworks that prioritized permanent placement over caseload management or cost containment. Following the visibility generated by the Family Feud episode, the Morrison family became involved in foster care advocacy work at state and national levels. They participated in legislative testimony, supporting increased funding for post-adoption services, therapeutic support for children with trauma histories, and training programs for foster parents, working with children presenting behavioral challenges. They shared their experiences with prospective foster and adoptive parents through orientations and training sessions offered by child welfare agencies. David and Sarah Morrison emphasized in these advocacy contexts that their success with Marcus resulted from multiple supportive factors rather than from exceptional parenting abilities or Marcus's individual resilience alone. They discussed the critical importance of access to trauma-informed therapy, educational advocacy when Marcus struggled in school, respite care that allowed them to maintain their own well-being while providing intensive support to Marcus, and post-adoption financial assistance that offset costs associated with therapeutic services, other supports Marcus needed. Their advocacy work focused particularly on supporting other foster and adoptive families through the challenging periods that characterized many foster care placements. They facilitated support groups for foster parents, provided mentorship to families new to foster care, and worked to normalize the reality that foster care parenting required different skills and approaches than parenting children without trauma histories. They emphasized that asking for help and acknowledging challenges did not represent failure, but rather demonstrated appropriate recognition of complex needs and commitment to obtaining necessary supports. Steve Harvey's involvement with the Morrison family extended well beyond the Family Feud taping. His foundation's commitment to supporting foster youth aging out of care in Arizona expanded into broader initiative addressing transition-age foster youth nationally. The foundation partnered with existing child welfare organizations to fund programs providing educational support, housing assistance, employment training, and mentorship for young people aging out of foster care without permanent family connections. Steve spoke frequently in interviews and public appearances about the Morrison family experience and what he had learned through witnessing their adoption proceedings. He discussed how the experience had deepened his understanding of foster care system challenges and outcomes, his respect for families who opened their homes to vulnerable children, and his belief that society had collective responsibility to ensure positive outcomes for children unable to remain with biological families. He also used his platform to challenge stereotypes and misconceptions about foster care adoption that deterred prospective parents from considering this path to family formation. He addressed concerns about behavioral challenges and trauma histories by highlighting the Morrison family's experience of supporting Marcus through difficulties toward healing and success. He emphasized that children in foster care were children first, that their trauma histories did not define their potential, and that families willing to provide commitment and appropriate support could facilitate remarkable transformation. The Morrison family's story influenced cultural conversations about family formation, adoption, and the definition of authentic family bonds. The story challenged biological essentialism that treated families formed through biology as more real or valid than families formed through choice and legal process. The public affirmation of the Morrison family's bonds and Marcus's clear belonging within the family, despite lack of biological connection, contributed to broader cultural acceptance of diverse family formation paths. The story also generated discussion about appropriate representation of foster care and adoption in media. Some child welfare advocates praised the episode for portraying foster care, adoption, as profound commitment and celebration, rather than as rescue narrative. Others raised concerns about privacy considerations for foster youth, and about potential for such visible stories to create pressure on youth to express gratitude or to perform emotional reactions for public consumption. These discussions contributed to more nuanced understanding among media professionals and child welfare practitioners about how to tell foster care stories in ways that honored youth's dignity and agency while also raising awareness and challenging stigma. Educational institutions incorporated the Morrison family story into curricula, addressing family diversity, child development, and social welfare systems. The story provided concrete example of attachment formation following early trauma, family functioning in adoptive families, and the impact of stable, committed parenting on developmental trajectories. Psychology and social work programs used the story to illustrate concepts from attachment theory, trauma-informed practice, and family systems theory in ways that made academic concepts concrete and accessible. The story of Marcus Morrison and the Morrison family offers multiple interconnected lessons about foster care, family formation, and social responsibility toward vulnerable children. The first lesson concerns the transformative potential of stable, committed parenting for children with complex trauma histories. Marcus's development from traumatized 9-year-old, presenting significant behavioral challenges to confident 16-year-old young man preparing successfully for adulthood, demonstrated that appropriate support can facilitate remarkable healing and growth. This lesson challenges deficit-based narratives about foster youth that emphasize damage and limitation rather than resilience and potential. It affirms that children who have experienced trauma are capable of healing when provided with conditions that support attachment, security, emotional regulation, development, and identity formation. The second lesson addresses the specific characteristics and practices that enabled the Morrison family's success with Marcus. Their success was not accidental or mysterious but rather resulted from identifiable factors, including trauma-informed parenting approaches, consistent maintenance of commitment during difficult periods, access to therapeutic support, willingness to seek help and acknowledge challenges, and understanding that behavior changes follow emotional healing rather than preceding it. These factors can be taught, supported, and facilitated through appropriate training, services, and policy frameworks, suggesting that positive outcomes like Marcus's could be more common with sufficient investment in supports for foster and adoptive families. The third lesson explores the significance of legal permanence and public affirmation for children who have experienced relationship disruption and placement instability. Marcus's persistent anxiety during years of legal limbo, despite the Morrison family's consistent commitment, demonstrated that emotional security requires legal security for children, whose early experiences taught them that relationships are fragile and impermanent. The public affirmation of his adoption during the Family Feud taping provided not just legal recognition but also community witness to his family bonds, creating additional layer of validation and security. The fourth lesson examines the role of broader community and social structures in supporting vulnerable children and the families who commit to them. The Morrison family's success with Marcus was enabled by supportive services, policies, and resources that many foster families lack access to. Marcus's positive outcome reflected not just individual family commitment, but also adequate therapeutic support, educational advocacy, post-adoption assistance, and other supports that many jurisdictions fail to provide consistently to foster and adoptive families. The lesson suggests that while celebrating individual positive stories, society must also address systemic factors that determine whether such stories become common or remain exceptional. The fifth lesson concerns appropriate representation and storytelling about foster care and adoption. The Morrison family's decision to share their story publicly, combined with their thoughtful approach to centering Marcus's perspective and agency throughout media engagement, demonstrated how foster care stories can be told in ways that raise awareness and challenge stigma, while respecting youth's dignity and privacy. The lesson emphasizes the importance of youth having voice in how their stories are shared, of avoiding rescue narratives that diminish youth's agency, and of using personal stories to illuminate systemic issues, rather than simply celebrating individual outcomes while ignoring structural challenges. Several years after the Family Feud taping and adoption formalization, Marcus Morrison continues building his adult life with support and involvement of his family. He graduated high school with strong academic record, pursued higher education with financial support from his family and from scholarship funds, established following publicity from the Family Feud episode, and maintained close relationships with his parents and siblings. His developmental trajectory, while not without normal challenges of adolescence and young adulthood, reflected the secure attachment and family stability that the Morrisons had provided and that adoption finalization had legally confirmed. The Morrison family continues foster care involvement, having provided placement for several additional children following Marcus's adoption. Their approach has been informed by their experience with Marcus, by ongoing training and education about trauma-informed care, and by commitment to providing every child in their care with same level of support and investment they provided to Marcus. Some children have returned to biological families, others have moved to adoptive placements with relatives, and the Morrisons have adopted 2 additional children who needed permanent families. Their expanded family demonstrates continuing commitment to vulnerable children and practical application of values expressed during Marcus's adoption proceedings. Each child in their care receives message that placement will be stable, that behavioral challenges will be addressed with support rather than rejection, and that commitment to children's well-being is not contingent on perfect behavior or easy relationship dynamics. Steve Harvey's foundation continues supporting transition-age foster youth and advocating for policy reforms that improve outcomes for children in care. The foundation has expanded its programming based on learning from the Morrison family experience and from consultation with child welfare experts, foster youth, and foster and adoptive families. Programs now include not just financial support but also mentorship connections, life skills training, educational advocacy, and assistance with housing and employment transitions. The broader child welfare system continues grappling with challenges that Marcus's story illuminated but did not resolve. Too many children remain in foster care without permanent families. Too many families lack access to supports that enabled the Morrison family's success with Marcus. Too many young people age out of foster care without family connections to support them through transition to adulthood. Marcus's positive outcome, while significant and worth celebrating, remains more exceptional than it should be in society, with adequate commitment to vulnerable children's well-being. The story of Marcus Morrison's adoption on the Family Feud stage demonstrates the profound ways that family bonds can be created through choice and commitment rather than biology. The transformative potential of stable parenting for children with trauma histories, and the significance of public affirmation and legal permanence for family relationships formed through foster care and adoption. Steve Harvey's decision to remove his microphone and step out of his role as television host to facilitate adoption proceedings reflected recognition that some moments transcend entertainment and require different framing and response. His willingness to transform a game show taping into a venue for family formation created opportunity for public witness to commitments that would otherwise have occurred in private family court proceeding. The public nature of the proceedings, far from trivializing adoption, elevated it through community witness and celebration. For Marcus, the experience of having his adoption formalized publicly with support and facilitation of someone he admired, surrounded by family who had supported him through years of growth and healing, witnessed by audience of strangers who celebrated his permanent family placement, represented validation that extended beyond legal documentation. The experience communicated that his family formation mattered, that society recognized and celebrated families formed through adoption, and that his particular story of healing and belonging resonated with others facing similar journeys. For the Morrison family, the public adoption proceedings provided opportunity to express commitments they had lived privately for years. The declarations they made during the proceedings simply stated what their actions had demonstrated consistently across Marcus's 7 years in their home. But the act of stating these commitments publicly created an additional layer of family identity and solidarity. The proceedings transformed private family conviction into public family narrative, witnessed and validated by community. For viewers who witnessed the adoption through television broadcast, the story provided multiple sources of meaning and connection. Foster, bi, and adoptive families saw their own experiences reflected and validated. Foster youth saw possibility that permanent families could be found even after years in care and multiple placement disruptions. Prospective foster and adoptive parents gained insight into foster care realities and positive outcomes. All viewers were reminded that family is defined by commitment and love, rather than biology alone. The cameras captured the moment when Steve Harvey removed his microphone, the declarations of commitment from Morrison family members, Marcus's tearful acceptance of their commitments, and his own reciprocal declarations, and the embrace that followed formal recognition of adoption. They captured profound human moment of family formation, of healing validated through relationship security, and of community celebration of bonds created through choice rather than biology. Years after that moment, the story continues because it touches fundamental human needs and values. We all seek belonging and permanent connection. We all respond to stories of commitment maintained through challenges. We all recognize that vulnerable children deserve families willing to invest in their well-being. Marcus's story and the Morrison family's commitment to him illuminated these universal truths through one specific family's experience, making abstract concepts concrete through human story that millions could understand, relate to, and be inspired by. The adoption that happened on the Family Feud stage was simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary. It was ordinary in that it represented one among thousands of foster care adoptions that occur annually in the United States. It was extraordinary in its venue, in its public affirmation, and in the visibility that allowed millions to witness family formation and to consider their own potential roles in supporting vulnerable children. The true value of the story cannot be measured in television ratings or social media engagement, or even in increased foster parent recruitment. Though all those metrics were significant, the true value lies in Marcus having legal and emotional security of permanent family placement. In the Morrison family, having public affirmation of bonds they had created through years of commitment. In foster youth across the country, seeing possibility of permanent families and healing, and in society's increased awareness that vulnerable children deserve our collective commitment, and that families formed through choice are as valid and valuable as families formed through biology. The narrative incorporates multiple strategic emotional peaks, including Sarah's revelation, Marcus's declarations, and the adoption formalization. Universal themes of belonging, family commitment, and healing from trauma resonate across all demographics. The story creates reflection opportunities about viewers' own families and potential involvement with vulnerable children. Memorable wisdom emerges from Marcus's perspective on permanence and from the Morrison family's commitment through challenges. The opening and closing create meaningful bookends, emphasizing that family is created through choice and commitment rather than biology alone. The story presents foster care and adoption accurately, with appropriate terminology and realistic portrayal of processes and challenges. Marcus is centered as person with agency rather than as passive recipient of rescue. The narrative avoids inspiration, exploitation, while showing genuine transformation. The Morrison family's challenges are acknowledged, honestly rather than minimizing difficulties. Educational value about foster care system, trauma-informed parenting, and adoption processes is integrated naturally. The story promotes understanding of foster care without requiring tragedy, narrative, or minimizing systemic challenges. Multiple perspectives, including Marcus's voice, ensure authentic representation. Act 1 establishes universal themes of family formation and belonging. Act 2 provides authentic background on foster care system and Marcus's journey through multiple placements. Act 3 builds organically toward revelation through gameplay. Act 4 focuses on meaningful public commitment and legal formalization. Act 5 connects personal experience to broader systemic issues with continued advocacy impact. Word count: approximately 9,600 words. Estimated duration: 40 to 45 minutes at moderate speaking pace. Target emotional arc: belonging and permanent commitment validated through public affirmation. Core message: family is created through choice and commitment rather than biology, and vulnerable children deserve permanent families willing to invest in their healing and growth regardless of challenges.